In a small village, hidden deep in the heart of Nzadula, where the sun rose gently over golden fields and children laughed as they played barefoot in the dirt, a girl named Kafuna lived a life full of dreams and kindness. She was the kind of person everyone admired, smart, hard-working, and filled with hope. Her smile could light up even the darkest corners of the village. Kafuna wasn't just another girl. She was a symbol of what the future could be, a future brighter than the struggles her family faced every day. Her family wasn't wealthy, but they had each other. Her mother, Zawadi, would wake up before dawn to prepare food, while her father, Jabari, worked tirelessly in the fields. Kafuna's older brother, Omari, carried the weight of being the eldest son, feeling the unspoken pressure to protect and provide. They didn't have much, but their love for each other seemed to be enough. Kafuna had dreams, bigger than Zadula. She wanted to become a doctor, to heal the sick and bring pride to her family's name. She studied late into the night, under a flickering lantern, her fingers tracing the words in old, borrowed books. The villagers admired her determination. They would whisper, "Kafuna will make it one day. She'll make this village proud." But life has a cruel way of twisting even the purest of hopes. What no one knew, not even Kafuna, was that the very people she loved the most would soon make an unthinkable decision, one that would change her life forever. Kafuna believed her family would do anything to support her dreams. She never imagined they would become the ones to destroy them. Kafuna was the kind of girl who believed the world could be a better place, not just for her, but for her whole family. She wasn't like the other children who spent their days playing by the river or chasing goats through the fields. While they laughed and ran under the sun, Kafuna sat under the shade of an old baobab tree, her head buried in books that were worn and faded from years of use. She didn't mind though. To her, those books were treasures. They held the key to a future where her family wouldn't have to struggle anymore. She dreamed of becoming a doctor, not for wealth or fame, but because she wanted to help. She had seen too many people in Nzadula suffer from illnesses that no one understood. She remembered the day her youngest sister, barely more than a baby, had gotten sick with a fever that wouldn't break. Their mother tried everything, herbs, prayers, even an offering to the ancestors, but nothing worked. Kafuna sat by her sister's side, holding her tiny burning hand, whispering promises that one day she would learn how to stop people from suffering like this. She didn't know how yet, but she would. Her belief in education was unshakable. She knew it was the only way to escape the cycle of poverty that had gripped her family for generations. Kafuna imagined a life where her father didn't have to break his back in the fields, from sunrise to sunset, where her mother didn't have to worry about whether there would be enough maize to last through the week. She pictured her brother, Omari, walking with pride instead of with the weight of their family's struggles dragging him down. Every night, after finishing her chores, Kafuna would light a small oil lamp and study until her eyes burned. Her mother would scold her, telling her that too much reading wouldn't fill their empty stomachs. But Kafuna didn't care. She believed that if she worked hard enough, she could change everything. She didn't just want a better life, she needed one. Not for herself, but for the people she loved. When the news came that she had earned a place at the city's prestigious university, it felt like a miracle. The whole village buzzed with excitement. Kafuna was the first girl from Nzadula to ever receive such an honor. Her father held her tightly, his voice trembling as he said, "You're going to make us proud, Kafuna." Her mother, usually so stern and practical, wiped her eyes and kissed Kafuna's forehead, whispering, "You'll be the light that lifts this family." Even Omari, who rarely showed emotion, smiled and told her, "You'll be someone important one day." For the first time in her life, Kafuna felt like she was standing on the edge of something great. She wasn't afraid, she was ready. She believed, deep in her heart, that her family would do anything to help her succeed. After all, they loved her as much as she loved them. They were her world, and she was theirs. But sometimes, love isn't enough to stop desperation. And sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who hurt you in ways you never see coming. Kafuna didn't know it yet, but the same family who cheered for her that day would soon make a choice that would shatter her world, all for the sake of money. The sun in Nzadula, once warm and gentle, became a cruel, blazing force. Day after day, it scorched the land, turning green fields into dry, cracked earth. Kafuna's family watched helplessly as their crops withered and died. The maize that once stood tall and golden now crumbled to dust in their hands. Their cows grew thin, ribs sticking out like the bones of a forgotten skeleton. Water became scarce, and every bucket pulled from the shrinking river felt like a victory. Jabari, Kafuna's father, worked harder than ever, though his body ached with exhaustion. He woke before dawn, hoping to find some patch of soil that still held life. His once strong, calloused hands trembled from hunger and overwork, but he refused to stop. He believed if he could keep going just a little longer, things would get better. Zawadi, her mother, wasn't any different. She spent her days weaving baskets to sell at the market, but fewer travelers came through the village now. People were too busy fighting their own battles against the unforgiving drought. The little food they managed to scrape together was given to Kafuna and her siblings first. Jabari and Zawadi often pretended they weren't hungry, saying they'd already eaten. Kafuna knew they were lying. She saw how her father's once broad shoulders now looked narrow and frail. She noticed how her mother's clothes, which once fit snugly, now hung loose on her frame. It broke Kafuna's heart. She wanted to help, but they always told her the same thing. Your job is to study. One day, you'll lift us out of this. But the drought didn't care about dreams or hard work. It didn't care that Kafuna was smart or that her family was kind. It only took until there was nothing left to give. The first debt collector came not long after the last of their crops died. He was a tall man with a voice like gravel and eyes that seemed to see straight through them. He didn't shout or threaten. He didn't need to. He simply reminded Jabari of the loan he took to buy seeds and cattle back when the rains still fell. The man smiled as he said, "If you can't pay soon, we'll have to take the farm instead." More men came after that. Different faces, same cold eyes. They didn't care about the drought or the starving children. All they wanted was their money. Each visit felt like a noose, tightening around the family's neck. Jabari stopped talking as much. His voice, once full of warmth and laughter, grew quiet and distant. Zawadi tried to keep her spirits up, but Kafuna often caught her staring into the distance, her eyes glassy and unfocused, like she was somewhere far away. Omari, Kafuna's brother, changed too. He was once her protector, always teasing her, but never letting anyone else say a bad word about his little sister. Now, he barely spoke. He spent more time in the village, talking to men Kafuna didn't recognize. When he did come home, his face was hard, his eyes guarded. He stopped smiling. Kafuna didn't understand what was happening. She just knew her family felt different, like a shadow had settled over their home, and no matter how brightly the sun blazed outside, it couldn't chase it away. The weight of the debt hung over them like a curse. Each day, the fear of losing everything grew heavier. Kafuna still believed they could make it through somehow. She believed her family's love was stronger than any hardship. What she didn't realize was that desperation can twist even the purest hearts. And when people have nothing left to lose, they sometimes make choices that can never be undone. One scorching afternoon, when the air felt thick and heavy with despair, a stranger arrived in Nzadula. His name was Bantu, a wealthy trader who traveled from village to village, known for his silk robes and rings that gleamed like stolen sunlight. He didn't look like he belonged in a place where children cried from hunger and fields lay barren. His clothes were clean, his shoes polished, and his skin glistened as though the heat didn't dare touch him. Bantu came with promises. He spoke of gold, food, and a life without struggle. Words spread fast. People gathered around him like moths to a flame, listening to his smooth, honeyed voice. He claimed he could erase debts, rebuild farms, and make the drought feel like a distant nightmare. All he asked for in return was a little sacrifice. Kafuna's family, desperate and broken, couldn't resist listening. Jabari stood at the edge of the crowd, his face lined with worry. Zawadi clutched her shawl tightly, her eyes flickering with a hope she was too afraid to hold on to. And Omari watched Bantu differently. His eyes weren't hopeful, they were calculating. Later that night, when the village was quiet and the only sounds were crickets and the distant howl of a hungry jackal, Bantu came to their home. He didn't knock, he didn't have to. It was like he knew they were waiting for him. His voice was soft, almost kind, as he spoke about their suffering. He talked about how strong families sometimes needed to make painful choices to survive. His words twisted around them like a snake, squeezing tighter with each promise of salvation. Then he asked to speak to Omari alone. Kafuna didn't hear what was said. She only saw their faces through a crack in the wall. Bantu leaned in close, his lips barely moving as he whispered to Omari. His eyes burned with something dark and dangerous. Omari didn't pull away. He just stared, his jaw tight, his fists clenched at his sides. Whatever Bantu offered, it wasn't kindness, it wasn't mercy, it was something else, something Kafuna didn't understand yet. When Bantu finally left, the night felt colder, even though the air was still thick and hot. Omari didn't speak. He sat outside for hours, staring at the moon, his face unreadable. Kafuna wanted to ask him what Bantu said, but something in his expression stopped her. He didn't look like her brother anymore. He looked like a man who had been forced to carry a weight too heavy for his shoulders. The next morning, Jabari and Zawadi acted like nothing had happened. They smiled for Kafuna, talked about better days coming soon, and promised everything would be all right. But their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Omari avoided Kafuna entirely. He barely looked at her, and when he did, his gaze felt distant, like he was seeing someone else, not his little sister. Kafuna didn't know it yet, but that night, Bantu had made an offer that no family should ever have to consider. He promised to erase their debts, give them enough food to last through the next season, and even help Omari start his own business. All they had to do was let Kafuna go. The family that once swore they'd do anything to protect her was now faced with a question no one dared to ask out loud. What's a daughter's life worth when it means saving everyone else? And Omari, the brother who once shielded Kafuna from every danger, was now the one holding the answer. Omari couldn't sleep that night. Bantu's words echoed in his mind, twisting and turning until they no longer sounded like a terrible idea. They sounded like the only way out. He sat outside, staring at the stars, his heart pounding in his chest. His little sister, Kafuna, had always been the light of their family. She was smart, kind, and full of hope. Hope that the rest of them lost a long time ago. But hope didn't fill empty stomachs or chase away debt collectors. Hope didn't stop his father from getting weaker by the day, or his mother from crying when she thought no one was watching. Bantu's offer wasn't even spoken outright. It was a whisper, a suggestion that slithered into Omari's ear like a curse. If Kafuna were to disappear, Bantu had said, his voice smooth and low, your family would never have to suffer again. No more hunger, no more debt. A new life, a better life. Omari hated himself for not saying no right away. He loved Kafuna. She wasn't just his sister. She was his shadow, growing up, always trailing behind him, asking questions, laughing at his jokes, believing he could do anything. But now, he couldn't even protect her from the cruel reality they were living in. Every day, he watched his father's strength fade and his mother's eyes grow dull. He watched their farm turn to dust and heard the debt collector's threats grow louder. He saw the fear in his mother's eyes when she realized they had nothing left to sell. Omari tried to think of another way. He tried to imagine stealing from the traders in the market or running away to the city to find work. But no matter how many ideas ran through his mind, they all ended the same way. His family starving, their land taken, and Kafuna still leaving for the university, never knowing what happened to them after she was gone. Bantu's offer dangled in his mind like forbidden fruit. Enough money to pay off the debts, enough food to last for years, a future where his mother smiled again, where his father didn't look broken, and where Omari wasn't a failure who couldn't provide for his family. All it would cost was Kafuna. He tried to tell himself she would understand, that she would forgive him if she knew it was the only way to save their family. Maybe she wouldn't even suffer. Maybe Bantu would take her somewhere far away, where she'd have a better life too. He clung to that thought like a lifeline, because the other possibilities, the ones where Bantu wasn't the savior he pretended to be, were too horrible to imagine. Omari wasn't a bad person. He wasn't cruel, but desperation changes people. It turns love into weakness and hope into a burden. He thought about their father collapsing in the field last week, too weak to stand. He remembered his mother's trembling hands as she counted the last of their food. He heard the debt collector's voice, cold and final, saying they had 1 week left before they lost everything. The next morning, Omari made his decision. His heart felt like stone, heavy and cold in his chest. He couldn't look at Kafuna without feeling sick, but he told himself this was for her too, that without this sacrifice she'd come back to a dead family and an empty home. So when Bantu returned that evening, his eyes sharp and knowing, Omari didn't stop him. He didn't fight. He didn't beg for another way. He simply nodded, his voice barely a whisper as he agreed to the unthinkable plan. Kafuna would disappear, and the family would live. Omari told himself he wasn't a monster. He was just doing what needed to be done. But deep down, he knew that after this, nothing would ever be the same again. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. For the first time, in what felt like forever, there was laughter in Kafuna's home. Her mother, Zawadi, hummed an old lullaby while stirring a pot of stew, the rich smell filling the small house. Her father, Jabari, sat by the fire, his usual tired, distant expression replaced by something softer, almost peaceful. Even Omari smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Kafuna couldn't remember the last time they had a meal like this. There was meat sizzling on the fire, sweet potatoes roasting, and a jug of fresh palm wine sitting on the table. It felt like a dream, a break from the endless days of hunger and worry. She didn't question it. She wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were finally turning around. Her mother called her over, wrapping her in a tight hug. "Tonight, we celebrate you, my daughter," she said, her voice trembling. "You've made us so proud. The first from our village to go to the university." Kafuna's heart swelled with joy. This was all she ever wanted, to make her family proud, to give them a reason to hold their heads high again. She looked at Omari, who sat quietly by the door, his head down. "Omari, you're quiet tonight," she teased. "Are you not happy for me?" He forced a smile. "I'm happy for you, Kafuna, more than you know." His voice was low, almost a whisper, and for a moment, Kafuna thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Sadness, fear, she couldn't tell. But before she could ask, her mother pulled her to the table, laughing and pushing a plate into her hands. "Eat, child," Zawadi said. "Tonight, you eat until you're full." The family gathered around, eating and laughing like they hadn't in months. Kafuna felt warmth in her chest, a feeling she hadn't felt in so long. It wasn't just the food, it was the sense of togetherness. For the first time, the weight of the drought, the debt and the fear seemed to vanish. She talked about her plans for the city, how she would study hard, become a doctor, and return to the village to help the people who had always believed in her. She promised to buy her father new farming tools and her mother a new dress. She even joked that she'd find a rich husband to build them a big, beautiful house. They laughed, but behind their laughter, something felt off. She noticed how her mother's hands shook when she reached for her cup, how her father avoided her eyes, how Omari's smile faded too quickly, his jaw tight. Still, Kafuna pushed the worry away. This was a night for celebration, and she didn't want to ruin it. The night grew late. Kafuna's stomach was full, her heart light. She leaned back, her eyelids heavy, a sleepy smile on her lips. "I can't remember the last time I felt this happy," she murmured. "Thank you for this. I love you all so much." Her mother looked away. Her father cleared his throat but said nothing. Omari stared at the ground, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. Kafuna didn't see the way her mother wiped tears from her eyes. She didn't see the guilt etched into her father's face, and she didn't see the way Omari's shoulders shook, his breath hitching as he fought the war inside his heart. She didn't know this wasn't a celebration. It was a goodbye, and by the time she realized the truth, it would be too late. The night was cooler than usual, a soft breeze whispering through the trees. The moon hung low, casting silver light over the village. Kafuna, feeling full and happy from the feast, offered to fetch water from the well. Her mother started to protest, but Kafuna laughed, insisting she needed the walk to shake off the heaviness in her belly. She grabbed the clay jug and stepped into the quiet night, humming softly to herself. The village was still, the only sounds coming from distant crickets and the crackle of their dying fire. As she neared the well, Kafuna heard voices, low and hurried. She recognized one instantly, Omari. Curious, she stepped closer, hiding behind the thick trunk of a tree. What she heard made her blood run cold. "She won't feel anything," Bantu's smooth, snake-like voice murmured. "It'll be quick. Your family will be free, rich even. You'll never have to struggle again." There was silence for a moment. Then Omari's voice came, broken and raw. "She's my sister. She trusts me." His voice trembled, full of guilt. "This isn't right." Bantu laughed softly, a chilling sound in the darkness. "Right? Was it right when your father collapsed in the field from hunger? Was it right when the debt collectors promised to take your home? Desperate times need desperate choices, boy. This is the only way." Kafuna felt her throat tighten, her chest aching with each shaky breath. Her own brother, the one who used to carry her on his back, who promised to protect her from everything. He was part of this. He was going to let her die. Her heart pounded so hard she thought they might hear it. Her mind screamed at her to move, to run, but her legs felt frozen. Tears burned her eyes. How could they do this to her? How could her family, the people she loved more than anything, plan something so cruel and smile at her like nothing was wrong? Omari's voice broke through her spinning thoughts. "It's done then," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tomorrow night. Tomorrow night." Kafuna's chest tightened. They weren't just planning to betray her. They were going to hand her over like a piece of meat to a wolf for money. Her breath hitched, loud in the quiet. Bantu's head snapped toward the sound. Kafuna's heart seized. She couldn't stay. She couldn't let them find her. Before they could see her, Kafuna turned and ran. She didn't care about the noise, didn't care if they heard her now. Her bare feet slapped against the dirt path, rocks digging into her skin, but she didn't stop. Branches tore at her arms and legs, scratching her, but the pain didn't matter. All she could think about was getting away, away from Omari, away from Bantu, away from the family that had decided her life was worth less than a pile of coins. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't slow down. She ran past the well, past the village's edge, and into the dark forest beyond. The trees swallowed her whole, their twisted branches reaching like claws. The night was alive with sound, rustling leaves, distant animal calls. But Kafuna didn't care. She couldn't stop. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get as far away as possible. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed in pain, but still, she ran. Her body felt like it might collapse, but the thought of Omari's voice, the betrayal in his words, pushed her forward. She couldn't let them find her. She wouldn't let them win. Somewhere deep in the forest, where the moonlight barely touched the ground, Kafuna finally collapsed, gasping for air. Her body shook with sobs, her heart shattered. She wasn't safe yet, but she was free, for now. The sun rose sluggishly over Nzadula, casting a dull, unforgiving light on the village. It had been days since Kafuna disappeared. Her mother wept openly, wailing her name into the wind, while her father sat in silence, his eyes hollow and lifeless. Omari stayed away from them, his stomach twisted with guilt and fear. He told himself Kafuna was probably lost, maybe hurt, but she was strong. She'd come back. She had to. Bantu returned, just as he promised. He arrived on horseback, his silk robes as pristine as ever, a heavy sack slung over his shoulder. Omari's heart pounded as he saw him approach. This was it, the reward, the end of his family's suffering. He told himself it was worth it. He had to believe that. Bantu didn't bother with pleasantry. He tossed the sack to the ground in front of Omari, the weight of it thudding against the dirt. Omari stared at it, his throat dry. He expected gold, enough to save his family from ruin, enough to make the pain mean something. But when he opened the sack, his heart stopped. It wasn't gold. It was ash. Cold, dark ash. Bantu smiled, but it wasn't kind. You thought betrayal comes with a reward, boy? You gave me your sister's life for nothing but dust. Desperate fools like you are easy to manipulate. His voice was low, almost amused. Your family's shame is your true payment. Omari couldn't breathe. His mind screamed, but no sound came from his throat. He wanted to attack Bantu, to scream, to beg, but his body wouldn't move. He had lost everything, and now he had nothing left, not even his dignity. The villagers gathered around, watching the exchange. They saw the sack, saw Omari's shaking hands and Bantu's cruel smirk. Whispers spread like wildfire. People who once admired Kafuna's family for their strength and resilience now stared at them with disgust. Then the truth began to unravel. Someone overheard Bantu's taunts. Another villager, who had seen Omari sneak off with Bantu that night, spoke up. Piece by piece, the horror came to light. The feast, the betrayal, the deal made in the shadows. Gasps filled the air as the elders were summoned. Jabari and Zawadi pleaded, saying they never wanted this. They tried to convince the crowd they had no choice, that it was all for survival, but the village didn't care. Kafuna was loved by everyone. She was their shining light, their hope for a better future. And now she was gone, sold off like a piece of livestock. Omari fell to his knees, trembling. He whispered. I just wanted to save. His voice cracked, but no one pitied him. He wasn't a hero. He was a traitor. The village elders didn't take long to decide. Betrayal of family, of community, that was unforgivable. They stood tall, their faces stone cold as they delivered the punishment. Jabari, Zawadi, Omari, your family is no longer welcome in Nzadula. Take what you can carry and leave. You are exiled forever. Zawadi lapsed in tears. Jabari bowed his head, his spirit. Omari stared at the dirt beneath him, knowing this was all his fault. He would carry this weight for the rest of his life. As they walked out of the village, heads down, the people turned their backs on them. No one spoke. No one looked at them. The family that was once admired was now a symbol of shame. And somewhere, deep in the forest, Kafuna, heartbroken and alone, didn't know that her family had already lost everything they betrayed her. Months passed, and the village of Nzadula carried on, though it wasn't the same without Kafuna. Her disappearance became a painful memory, a story whispered among the villagers. Life moved forward, but the weight of her absence lingered. Children still played in the fields. Elders still gathered to share old tales, but the spark of hope Kafuna once carried seemed to vanish with her. One day, as the sun hung high and hot in the sky, a figure appeared on the dusty road leading to the village. At first, people squinted, thinking it was a trader or a traveler passing through. But as the figure came closer, the whispers started. The woman walked with grace, her head held high. She wore a beautiful dress, woven with rich, colourful fabrics the village had never seen before. Gold bracelets jingled softly on her wrists with each step, and her hair, once braided simply, now flowed in thick, elegant curls. It wasn't until she reached the village centre that someone gasped aloud, "Kafuna! It's Kafuna!" The name rippled through the crowd like a wave, disbelief and awe mixing together. People rushed closer, murmuring her name as if afraid she might disappear again. Kafuna stood before them, stronger than ever. Her eyes, once full of innocence, now held a quiet strength. She wasn't the same girl who left. She had survived. She had grown. Rumours swirled about where she had gone, and how she had returned so different. Some said she was rescued by a kind family in the city. Others believed she found her way to the university on her own and built a life from nothing. The truth didn't matter. What mattered was that she was alive. Kafuna didn't answer the questions. She only smiled, though her eyes never quite reached that warmth they once held. She walked through the village, looking at the faces she once knew so well. Children stared up at her, wide-eyed with wonder. The elders watched in silence, their faces etched with guilt and regret. Word of her return spread quickly. Even her family, now living in a small hut outside the village, cast out and broken, heard the news. Zawadi wept, trembling with both relief and shame. Jabari sat in silence, his head in his hands. Omari couldn't bring himself to face the truth. He didn't deserve to see her again. The villagers gathered, expecting Kafuna to speak, to tell them where she had been and what had happened. But instead, she gave them something else, something no one expected. Kafuna announced she had come back to build a school, a place where children could learn, grow, and chase dreams, just like she once dreamed of doing. She promised no child would ever have to leave the village to find a better life. The better life would come to them. The village erupted in cheers, grateful and humbled. They saw Kafuna not as a victim, but as a hero, a survivor who returned not with anger, but with a gift. But Kafuna's eyes never wandered to the edge of the village where her family waited in silence, hoping for forgiveness. She never spoke their name, never acknowledged their presence. Her heart still carried the weight of their betrayal, and some wounds, no matter how much time passes, can never fully heal. Kafuna didn't come back for them. She came back for the village, for the children who still believed in something better. And with that, she became more than the girl they once knew. She became a legend. Sometimes, the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people you trust most. Kafuna learned this in the most brutal way possible. Her family, the very people she sacrificed for, the ones she dreamed of saving from a life of poverty, chose money over her life. The warmth of their love, which once felt unbreakable, turned out to be a lie wrapped in sweet words and fake smiles. But Kafuna didn't let that betrayal destroy her. She didn't let the darkness consume her heart. She rose from it. She survived when no one expected her to, rebuilt herself when no one was looking, and came back stronger than anyone could have imagined. Her return wasn't to seek revenge or to demand answers. She didn't scream, cry, or ask why they did what they did. The truth was, she already knew the answer. Desperation makes people do unthinkable things. That didn't make it right, and it didn't make it hurt any less. But Kafuna realized something important. She couldn't change the past. She couldn't undo what her family had done. So, she chose to change the future instead. She poured her strength into something greater than herself, into her village, into the children who still had hope in their eyes. She built a school so no child would ever have to leave home to chase their dreams the way she once thought she had to. She gave her people knowledge, opportunity, and the one thing she was denied, a chance at a better life without sacrificing anyone they love. Yet, despite her kindness, despite her success, the one thing Kafuna never gave her family was forgiveness. They watched her from afar, broken and ashamed, but she never looked their way, not once, not because she hated them. No, Kafuna didn't have hate in her heart anymore. It was because the part of her that once needed them was gone. They weren't her family anymore, not after what they did. Kafuna's story isn't just one of betrayal. It's a reminder that sometimes the people we love most are capable of hurting us in ways we never imagined. It's a warning that even the closest bonds can be shattered by greed and fear. But more than that, it's a lesson in resilience. Kafuna didn't let betrayal define her. She didn't let it make her cruel or bitter. She let it make her unstoppable. The question is, if you were in Kafuna's place, would you have the strength to rise from the ashes? And more importantly, could you ever forgive a family who chose money over your life?